And off we go.
And off we go to the second part of the Greenway Trail. This part from Beacon Hill to Old Mill Road. And I should say Beacon Hill Road. Obviously, we're not starting from the top of the hill. And this is last time where we went from, and it's upside down because I wanted to go from left to right, but we started in the New Harbor area and we did the Greenway up, and ended up over here at Beacon Hill Road. And today we're picking up at Beacon Hill Road and we're going to Old Mill Road. And this is an overlay. You know, the path is in two colors, or three colors really. The bright yellow is the main path that we're taking, and we're starting down here on the left. There's an opportunity to do a little loop or figure eight. And we are actually, in this presentation, we're going to mostly be going the main yellow till we get to Old Mill Road. And then we're going to time travel back to the spot and do this last bit at the end, which will put us back on Old Mill Road, just because I wanted to, you know, provide everything that you could see in all the different permutations of this walk. And the blue here are some other ways you could go off to down into the Enchanted Forest at this point, or you could go on to a different access point out on Old Mill Road. So I've labeled these through the discussion as intersection 1, intersection 2, and intersection 3. If you don't want to get lost, just start and keep going right whenever you have to. All right. So this is our my favorite old map, and on the side is I figured out, boy, I'm getting good at electronics. I figured out how to track my trail. So on the right is my actual pathway to see how I, you know, exactly where I was going, trying to match up where I am in this relative to this. First of all, this old map, this 1890s map, is always interesting. For one thing, this is what's called Center Road, but this is not how Center Road goes now. Center Road breaks off right here about at the end of the airport runway and goes this way. And this little spur still exists there. People live down here. Here's the driveway to Heinz Field. So this is just to show how we would get there now. And you come around the corner by Smiling Through, and there's this little pond called Horse Pond. And then you go down Old Mill Road, only it ends here. And what's interesting is at this time in the life of Block Island, Old Mill Road did not exist. So there was no connecting road here. You could get this far, or you could come in from the west side and get this far. So Old Mill Road, as we know it today, was not there. And the area that we're traveling is coming up from Beacon Hill up here, and it's basically going right along this ridge line. And you see where these topographic lines are close together, that's where it's very steep. So this is the area that we're covering. So with that, we'll start. And the very first part that we go up, it's marked very well with many signs. Greenway, there's a monument naming this as Marsh Hawk Hollow, dedicated to Sally Hamilton Oppenheimer and Anne F.H. DuPont. And it's got a turnstile, it's got a little sign that says walkers only, and here's how you get to Old Mill Road. So you really can't miss it. Even if you weren't noticing these sort of barway attempt at curbing erosion. Now I did this walk a couple of times over the last 10 days, most recently on Sunday, which was, if anybody is familiar with Block Island, this past weekend on Saturday, we had one of the most torrential downpours I think I've ever seen. So some of these paths were taken before, like the one on the left, when it's not too bad. And you'll see some others where erosion has occurred. Anyway, you go up the hill, these little barways sort of help keep your step because it's pretty steep here. And then you turn this corner, and as you turn this corner, you're still going upwards. And at the top of the hill, you pretend to turn around and look at the view, but really you're catching your breath. And so you're looking down the hill back at Doc Willis's farm, or you're looking forward, and we see the first of many American holly, which I've been talking about all winter, springing up. We see them in the wintertime because the foliage is basically off the landscape. So we see the things that are still leafed out, and the holly is one of them, and they're beautiful. Let's see, what has happened there? I've come to a place where there's an intersection. This is the first intersection. And if you were to go straight, it kind of goes uphill. If you go left, which I have in the wrong order, we've already gone that way. We're not going that way anyway, we're going right. So just to go back a little bit, we're going to go this way. When you take these wide views, sometimes they get a little distorted. If you go for, this is uphill. And I want you to notice this tree right here, it's a long, big piece of shad that's lying down. We're going to see that later when we come back this way. But for now, we're going right, still going uphill. Here's some of the erosion, just a real washout. But we're starting to get into what I consider to be the main feature, historic feature of this walk, which is it's almost like an old road between two parallel running stone walls. But the first part is very stony, and you'll see it's very stony here. Off to the side, there is a stone bank or stone rock pile. And this is very interesting. You see these around the island in various places. I believe they are basically just a cache of stone. When you're plowing up the fields, you come up on Block Island, because we're a glacial moraine, so many stones and rocks. To get them out of the way and put them where they can be accessed if you need them, you pile them up in one place. And this is a rock pile number one. We'll see another one a little bit later on. But there's a lot of stones in there. Here's a little bit, we've just come up the path from the right here, and I've just stopped to look. No, we're going to carry on to the left, but that's a big pile of rock. Rocks, if you've been around Block Island, you know that rocks are everywhere, and they all forms, whether it's a rock pile or a stone wall, stepping stones, all kinds of rocks, and they're a major resource on Block Island, and they are so beautiful in their forms. Just stacked up here. Believe me, I spared you. There's only one picture of a stone wall in this presentation, but I can't stop looking at them. But where there are stones, there are lichens, lots of lichens of different types. On the left over here, we have this sort of frilly lichen, little tufts on this big giant granite rock. This is a brown sort of flat lichen, which you don't see brown very often. You're more likely to see green, gray, black. So this is an interesting lichen. I wish I knew more about the lichens, but that's the best I can do. And this is probably not a good time to ask you this, Charlotte, but you're recording, right? And then there are these beautiful gray lichens. So we've gotten past the stones and we're headed forward, and the stones are sort of giving way. There are more trees, and it's just such a wonderful little alleyway here with the stone wall on either side. I don't know. I looked pretty closely at the stone wall map to see if I could find this road, and I really couldn't. I can see where it should be. It looks like just a single stone wall on the stone wall map. So I don't know if it formed later or if it was an actual road for passage or just a dividing place for the farmer to move his cows or sheep from one place to the other. I really don't know, but it's enchanting. And almost all of these walks have a place that always feels particularly enchanted, old, storied. I just always have a wonderful feeling when I'm in this area. Off to the right, there's a sort of a peek through here, this big field. I'm not exactly sure if that's in conservation. I think it may be or will be, but I'll have to talk to Charlotte about that later. But there's a big open field to the right, or in this case, to the west. So onward, you start to get a sense of this whole area. The trees, you know, as I say, if these walls could talk, I wonder what stories they would tell. But in the time from when this road, if it was a road, was used, it has become pretty impassable for vehicles or for horse carts because of all these young trees. And they're pretty substantial, but they're still young in the grand scheme of things. These are a mix, so there are regular mix. So this is a shad, and this is a cherry growing right together. Most of the trees in this area are shad bush, or choke cherry. And just to remind you that the bark is very different. The shad is a smooth gray with the lichens, whereas the choke cherry is much more scaly and coarse and rough. But just in that small area, the colors are similar, but the textures are completely different. Texture, everything's about texture with me. There's one tree that's breaking down right along this stone wall, and it's filled with these shelf lichens. And a shelf lichen is just a form. I can't tell you what species this is particularly. We're going to see some others. There's a species called the purple Polypore. And this is definitely a polypore lichen. It doesn't have gills, it has pores. And most of the shelf lichens, they're called that because they grow out in these like little shells just stuck to the tree, are pore bearing, not gilled fungi. But their form, and these were incredibly supple. When I ran my hand down them, they just gave away. They were not brittle and hard and coarse. So it's relatively new growth, probably just this winter. Things are, you know, we're all looking for spring to start. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll find a flower. I did not find a single flower on this walk, but I found lots of sign that spring is coming. One of which is the new growth, the suppleness of these shelf lichens. So that's a pretty short area, this quote old road, and it sort of ends abruptly, ends right here. And then we pick up the path on the other side and go around the corner here. And this is just sort of standing from this photo. I'm standing on the sort of the dead end, looking at where we're going. This tree is grown up. It's got this wonderful lichens, don't always only grow on rocks. Of course, they grow on trees as well. This is one of those beautiful green shield lichens where they are round, relatively circular, and are like a shield plate over the whatever it is, the tree or the rock. So we're going to follow this way. We're going to get on the other side and look back. It's always good to look back from whence you've come, see what you can see. Things always look different when you look in different directions, different perspectives. And if you spend any time on Block Island, I'm sure you've noticed that. You go somewhere and you go, wow, I didn't know I could see that from here. And suddenly you just get turned around a little bit differently, and it all looks different. Well, the same is true of this path. Once I turned around, it looked all different. And it's always sort of surprising what you might find in the nooks and crannies of Block Island stone walls. So on we go. There's a little gap way, and you can almost you get a sense that we're moving away from the sort of heavy shrubs and treed part of the walk into a lot more of an open plain. We've come up that steep slope, and we're kind of going to be walking along a ridge for a while. So this is the way we're going. You come through the walk and you head this way, and then you'll get to an intersection number 2. And again, we're going to choose to go right. We're going to go this way, but keep this photo in mind. We're going to the right at the moment. And not too long, you come and you can tell you're up on a high ridge because you start getting little glimpses of the view. And we're looking down onto the airport runway. It's lots of wonderful things to see up here, even though, you know, it's early spring. There's really not much blooming and the birds aren't really moving around too much. Plenty of bird activity, but it's all winter birds, which are great. I was chorused the whole way by blue jays. And there's actually a bench up here where you can take in the view. And I was surprised at the things that you could see. Not only this great view out here, this is a little bit obscured. Maybe we could trim around the view a little bit. And I looked down at the ground and it's cobbly, and it's got this little flick of bark or something. And I looked a little closer and the little flick of bark turned out to be a mourning cloak butterfly. And I was shocked to see a butterfly this early in the season. Quite beautiful. I don't usually see these, and because they are an early season butterfly. And the reason they're early season is that they overwinter as the adult. And in the life cycle of a butterfly, in other words, the caterpillar to a cocoon or a chrysalis, and then to the adult of the butterfly, it overwinters as the adult or the butterfly. So it just sort of hibernates. And then when the days get longer and warmer, then they come to life and start mating, laying eggs, and which will turn into caterpillars, etc. So that's why it's such an early butterfly, is because it started off the spring as an adult. A little bit bedraggled, I will say, but beautiful. You could, in the sun, you could just get a glimpse of that beautiful blue beading, even if the edges of the wings were a bit tattered. They're usually scalloped a little bit, but these were, I would say the scallops were tattered. But what a pleasant surprise. Also, when you look closely, you see all kinds of things. The remains of a bird here in the trail on the left, nothing but a pile of feathers. This must have been quite a while ago because there weren't too many feathers left. But always pays to look down when you're walking around, not just up and out. So we're leaving the bench and continuing on to the more open part of the trail. And you start to see, again, instead of the smaller shrubs of shad and black cherry, you're moving towards the Turnip Farm in the Enchanted Forest area, where there are a lot more chestnut trees and bigger, taller trees. And that's what we're seeing here. And as the path goes down, it goes around this chestnut, and you can see there's a holly there. And of course, if you're coming back, this is if I had turned around and was going back now, there's the holly right there. So I say you can see it that going, I guess I should have said, you can see it going and coming back on either side of that wonderful tree. And the holly you wouldn't notice in the springtime and the summertime because everything else is green. But this time of year, you notice the hollies. And this old chestnut, which looks pretty barren, is sort of flanked or cloaked by green. The holly on the one side, and this beautiful sort of little bank right here of sphagnum moss. The mosses are quite beautiful these days, especially now after that heavy rain. Everything starts greening up, the mosses and the lichens especially. So you keep going and you find a signpost that says, I can't see what it says underneath my thing. I think it says Enchanted Forest, or no, Nathan Mott Park. So you go along, and this tree, if you look straight, you're going past the signpost. If you look to your right, you'll see this giant spindly Japanese black pine. And you can see this from many places on Block Island. If you go to the airport and look towards Enchanted Forest, or Nathan Mott Park, you look up, you'll see this tree. First of all, it's the only thing that tall. And second of all, it has a very distinctive kind of, I don't know, it looks like a tree that Dr. Seuss would draw, I think. But it's sort of like a wayfinder, a signpost. It helps you get your bearings. There are many, many, many places throughout this area, north, south, east, and west of that tree, where if you look, you can find the tree and get yourself oriented. As you go along this path, just past the sign that says to the Enchanted Forest, you come by this little sign that says trail closed. This is the old trail that used to, it's a very steep part that comes down. Well, at this point, you would go down this stairway that was made with timbers and platforms. So it was terraced. It was a terraced stairway that dropped you down from this high elevation down into what we call the Enchanted Forest or the Nathan Mott Park. But the erosion and time has really made this structure dangerous. So this pathway is now closed. It looks a little more open this time of year, but in the summertime when everything's leafed out, you really don't see that it's there anymore. And I've come in one of these other tours. I've come in from the other way from Nathan Mott Park near the end of the runway, and you have to go by where this trail is closed. And I have to say, I think the replacement trail is much more beautiful. It takes you by a giant chestnut, a giant maple, and which you wouldn't see if you had taken this old stairway. So I'm actually kind of glad. It's better for the landscape, and it's a lot more beautiful walk. Okay, so that's not the walk we're doing today, Kim. So we've come on, we keep going, we come to intersection number 3. And if we were to go left, you would take the trail down into the Enchanted Forest or towards the airport. The sign that you see off to the right there says, it points to Beacon Hill. That's where we have just come from. And where we're going is straight, and the sign says to Turnip Farm and Old Mill Road. So you can't, it's very, very well signed here. If you're going to Old Mill Road, you're not going to accidentally go the wrong place at this point. And as I say, just keep going right, you'll get there. And just in this area, just beyond kind of the intersection, again, I looked around to see what I could see. And I love this particular view of the landscape. You have the cedar tree here and this great little black pine up here. And this is a little tiny cedar tree is here. And I actually saw several trees in this area that at first you don't notice. But if you look, you start seeing things. First of all, that's a wonderful cedar, and it's a nice bushy one. It hasn't had too much deer browse. Cedar do well on Block Island if they can get to be taller than the deer. This little one, I think, is covered with so many brambles. I think it has a chance, but we'll see. But then I saw this little thing stuck in the middle, about halfway between where I was standing and the cedar tree. And I thought, well, what is that? It's sort of glinting like it has dewdrops on it. And then I looked a little more closely, and those dewdrops turned out to be pussy willows. And I thought this was a very surprising place to find a pussy willow tree, but there it was, doing quite well. And by today, this was several days ago, by today, that's probably, well, it's been a little cool, maybe by the end of the week when it warms up again, those little pussy willow toes are all going to be silvery and open. But that was, I think, the surprise vegetation of the walk. Then I turned around and looked in the other direction, and it looks like just forested scrabble. I look at these 2 big trees, and I go, wow, I felt like sesame. What's similar? Sesame Street. What do these trees have alike, and what do they have that's not alike? And they both have stuff still on them. But I looked a little more closely, and they're 2 different trees. We have a chestnut on the left, and it still has the chestnut husks up in the branches. And we have oak. They keyed out as an English oak. I would think that would be a white oak, but it's a very definite oak. And I gathered some leaves, and you can see, I took them back to my bench, used it as my little field station, and took a picture of the leaves from the chestnut, like this one. This particular chestnut still has the husks in the branches as well as a few leaves. But right now, if there's a tree that still has leaves, brown leaves on it, it's most likely an oak. And here's the smaller It's a little bit bedraggled, of course, but more rounded. It shows a little bit better in the photo over here where the lobes are rounded. And it does look very much like an English oak as opposed to a pin oak, which would have much more pointy lobes on the leaves. So surprising to see then that little, if you look closely, it just tells you, if you look closely, you notice just subtle changes. You see two different things and you see things in a different way. And on my way to examine that tree a little bit more closely, I saw on the ground this little guy, which is a spruce. It also keyed out as a white spruce, closely related to Norway spruce. So it may be in Norway, but Norways usually have needles all the way around the stems, and it does seem to show that the needles don't go fully all the way around. So, but in any case, it is a little tiny spruce. Where the spruce seed came from, I don't know, but there it is growing, and I'm sure hope we don't, I better mark that because I don't want it to get mowed. Spruce. All right. So we're still going left. I noticed it's always interesting to look at these branches that are halfway fallen across the pathways. For one thing, they're not usually so low that they're a problem, especially not for me, but they're always interesting in that what they have twined around them. In this case, it had another branch, but it also had some, oh my goodness. Well, it'll come to me in a second. Bittersweet. It has some bittersweet twined around it, which is usually it's a good example of why the twining vines are so detrimental. They twine around the tree, they shade out the tree when they're in bloom, so they don't get enough sunlight. And they basically choke and weigh the branches down so that they eventually succumb to the weight and the lack of sunlight. And they become great habitat if you can, as long as you can still walk underneath them. And you walk underneath those as if going under a bridge, and you come out into the Turnip Farm area, which again, I recently did one of these walks there, so you could tune into one of the other recordings and get a more in-depth exploration of the Turnip Farm area. What was amazing is between when I did that a month or 2 or 3 ago, I'm not sure, it's been mowed, so it looked completely different. I'm so happy I did it earlier when the grasses were still on, and I could point out things in that other presentation of, mint and other important flowers that now is all mowed and ready for spring. So you just follow that field down, and you go through I often talk about this little Merino grassland knob, right? So what we've done is we've come into the field, follow the path towards Old Mill Road. In this case, you're taking a left, but you didn't have the option to take a right. So you just take the path. You go by these newly mown fields, and eventually you'll come down this way. If you stop and look back, you'll see this Merino Knob, which is a feature of just such crappy, terrible, sandy soil that it hardly grows anything. But things that it grows are really special. And this is a little mini ecosystem that's considered to be globally imperiled because there are so few of them left. And here it is, another view. You sort of see it's got that crusty coat of reindeer moss or reindeer lichen. It's a lichen. It looks reindeer-like in that it looks like it has antlers. Also, supposedly the reindeer on the tundra will eat this. It's a lichen, therefore it is a symbiotic organism with both a fungi and an algae, a green or a blue-green algae. And it's the algae that can photosynthesize and produce the energy. And it's the fungi that can break down the substrate and garner nutrients for the organism. But it's always a great place to look at it, again, to see the forms and the colors. And this is getting really green because of all the rain we just had in the same area. And some of this is old tufts, of little blue stem and panic grass. Again, all these warm weather grasses that are so good for the late season production of seeds and nature on the island. Also in the area, just greening up are these green leaves. This is a mouse-eared hawkweed. And again, another typical plant of this Merino grassland feature. And off to the side was this interesting little red, I thought it was a red moss of some sort. And I just kept looking at it more and more closely. And what I discovered is that this is a haircap moss, and we'll see another one of these a little bit later, but the moss, unlike sphagnum moss, it looks like little stars, and they're fairly tall stems of moss. Moss is not a vascular plant that you think of. It doesn't have roots that sucks up water or nutrients. It does have, it's more like seaweed in that it has these threads that will anchor it to its spot, but it's not used for nutrient gathering. And haircap moss is like many plants, it's dioecious, it's male and female. And what we're looking at here, and I had never noticed before until I took the photo and then went home to look it up and learn about it, are the antheridia, which are the sperm producing structures of the haircap moss. And these little red cups are many structures in sort of a cup whorl, and they produce the sperm, which will then flow down into the female individual plants where the egg is. And in this species, there's only one, the female will produce only one seed. The sperm flows by water and by air to then settle onto the female structures. But in this case, it was a whole mass of these beautiful, tiny red. I didn't know what I was looking at first. At first, I thought maybe it was a flower of some sort, but it's not. It's just the male reproductive structure of haircap moss. And as I often say, if you look closely enough, you see unbelievable beauty. And along the way, another Japanese black pine, which I've been watching for years. It's getting bigger and bigger, which is great. It's pretty healthy. And there we find ourselves at the Turnip Farm gate and at Old Mill Road, where we could start another adventure, or in the case of this trip, time travel back to our second intersection 2. Instead, this time we're coming back from whence we came, and we're going to turn this way rather than go this way. Excuse me for a second. So we're going to explore these little loops. And at first you think, oh, it's just a dense bramble, and it's springtime. You can see it's redding up with the blackberry canes and different blackberries, of which there are many species, and the green of the greenbrier. And it's a very dense bramble. And that's what much of this first part of this trail is, very dense bramble. It's not till you get to Turnip Farm when it opens up and feels more expansive. But certain things really love the dense bramble and do well with them. And I saw in there, tucked in just a little bit down the path, this sharp-shinned hawk. And the sharp-shinned hawks and Cooper's hawks have relatively short, rounded wings, which make them able to fly, one, slowly, so they're not crashing into the dense vegetation. And it also gives them smaller area to be crashing their wings into things. You think of a falcon, they have long pointy wings, which is great for soaring and speed. But in the case of the sharp-shinned hawk and the Cooper's hawk, they're really much more adapted to a denser hunting area. And here this little guy was perched up looking at something. Usually when I take a picture like this, they're looking at me, but this had its eye on something else. But again, signs of spring. Again, the common greenbrier has got these tendrils and huge spikes, and it's very dense and difficult to maneuver. And I noticed they're starting to redden up. And I look closely, and these are little leaflet buds just coming. And then a little bit later, a couple of days later, I went from seeing just the buds, as I showed in the previous image, to now you're starting to see these little tiny leaflets just starting to burst open and spread apart. And you can see in this one, especially where it used to be red, and now it just looks like I don't know, a leafy piece of a broccoli or something. But quite amazing little bit of beauty, even if greenbrier is such a holy terror because of this point and because of the dense strength of the vine itself. I always do remind people that it does produce great seed and fruit for Black Island. It's like for birds and whatnot. Mice will also eat the fruit. They hang on the greenbrier late into the winter. So they're feeding late in the winter when other things aren't available. It is a native plant, and as long as you can control it in your yard and control it where you want to, don't malign it too much. But those thorns can hurt. So now I'm made this little short loop, and I'm coming back into the four-way intersection. And I mentioned before this long piece of shad laying on the ground. So we were on the other side on this path looking this way, and we took the right, which went that way. Now we're coming 180 degrees the other way, and we're coming back into this intersection. And before we went right, well, we're going to go right again only, but well, here, I'll slow down a little bit. Here's the intersection. I've just come up to it. This was where I came from before when we started. We went right to the rock pile. Now we're coming down this way, and we're going to go right this time to the second loop. That way. And we come to a second rock pile. Now, once I started looking at this a little bit more closely, I suspect that these were really one giant rock pile because they're very close in proximity. It's just that it took me a mile of walking in one direction and coming back to find the second part of it. I'm not sure, but it's extremely close physically. But again, another big rock pile. For what use, I do not know. But as I said before, you see these around the island in various places. Now in this loop, you have a lot of shad growing in here. And shad has a very distinctive shape. They're multi-trunks. Usually this is like the quintessential big shad clump. Multi-trunks in a clump, and then sort of out in a vase, and very sort of curly, like a twisted look to it. And if you look carefully, or maybe don't look too carefully, you see almost a red haze around in here. That is because there are tons of tiny little leaf buds on the shad coming out now. That's giving it a slight mauve look. And I often say a little bit, you don't see it too strongly yet on the island, but you will within the month start seeing that, especially on a foggy day. You look over these great expanses of shad that we have, and it looks like gray armature with a mauve haze. And those are all the tiny, tiny leaf buds that are reddening up right now all over the island's landscape. That's at the top. At the bottom, you see where it's so shaded, lots of mosses. And this is a really interesting little area of moss because there's actually two kinds of moss here. There's a sphagnum moss here, which is a different texture. And here you're seeing the haircap moss with that starry kind of umbrella starry look to it. But they're so interlaced that you can, you know, at first glance, you might think it was just one moss, but it in fact is not. And if you look closely at this haircap moss, you will notice that it has the female structure, the archegonia. This is where the single seed in the haircap moss is ripening. And in the case of mosses, they have these stalks with a capsule, and a lot of times the capsules will have like a little top, a little lid. They call it an operculum, and that will pop open, and the spores or the seeds will be released. In the case of the haircap moss, there's only a single seed in there, so it has a slightly different shape. But it was amazing to discover, and I didn't know I was discovering it until I got back in the lab, my home table, and started looking and wondering and questioning and learning that I actually got a picture of the male and the female plants at two different parts of this walk. And there we are. Oops, I went the wrong way. There we go. And just another look at that great shaggy sphagnum moss. And then I looked more closely at the moss, and there was a fly crawling around, signs of life other than birds. And again, if you look at it, it's a fly and it's beautiful. It's got that sort of multicolored iridescence. It's in the group called the blowflies. It's in the same family as the housefly, and they usually mature in, they say cow dung, but since we're not too far from Doc Willis's farm, I would suggest that maybe horse dung will do just as well, or mule. Anyway, there it was, quite beautiful and very busy around the sphagnum moss. More shelf lichens, or shelf fungus. Again, this one does key out to be something called the purple polypore, which I only say because it's so fun to say. The green is more likely than not just an algae growing on top of the fungus. But beautiful, beautiful. I'm always talking about the forms of trees. We saw the single multi-trunk clump of shad. In the case of the maples, it's usually one big trunk and opening out, arching out. And this is a typical form of the red maple or the swamp maple, very, very closely related and probably interrelated in many forms. And I think for the end of the walk, I was most surprised to find another little holly, and in the distance, a very large single tree, which turned out to be an oak. And it just stands on the landscape like the protector, overlooking the pathway. And I can't wait to see it leaf out soon. It's quite a beautiful tree, and quite tall compared to everything in its area. And again, just as to demonstrate, these leaves are a little bit better shape, sort of the rounded oak. Did I say maple before? I meant to say oak if I did. This is an oak, again, the English oak, and there's wonderful craggy bark, solid bark. And if you want to know how to find that tree, you just need to find the relative near end of where this trail comes out. Not too far down the road from where we started, across the street from Doc Willis's farm. And one of the great things, if you're tired, he's got this wonderful bench here. You can just sit on the bench and watch the animals go by. And then if you turn around and you want to make sure you get the right opening, this one does not have that steep bank of which to climb up. It does have quite a bit of up and down on the way. That's sort of the feature of this part of the island, but at least it's not a very steep ascent from this side. And of course, I made my bird list featuring the sharp-shinned hawk. And on this walk, I couldn't help but notice all the different types of trees that I saw, which I was not expecting to see. And then I had to I was going to make a tree checklist, but then I thought, no, I can't forget the other plants. And then I realized, well, let's see, fungi and mosses, maybe not, lichens, definitely not really considered plants. They're fungi or they're mosses. So I put plant plus checklist. Other things around the island right now: sea urchins, gray seal pups, glass eels, and the first blooming flower soon to come is skunk cabbage. And there's only one place on the island I know of where skunk cabbage is growing, and the flower of the skunk cabbage is in here, and it hasn't yet opened up quite enough to see that very interesting satellite looking flower. And with that, I thank you. I'm happy to take questions. And probably way too much information, but it was fun for me to learn. So thank you very much for your attention. And with that, and I should have mentioned you should all be looking for orbs on these little jaunts.
I saw a few, Kim.
Good. Maybe you're still seeing one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that was great. Thank you so much, Kim. The images, fabulous. The moss, I loved it. There was a couple, hold on, let me see. There was a couple things in the chat. I just wanted, Anna commented, what is the grass next to the reindeer moss by the Merino grassland?
The little tuft.
I guess.
The brown tufty grass. Yeah. I believe that one was little blue stem. A grass called little blue. It's kind of, this time of year, it's a little hard to tell. Are they short because they're short, or are they short because the winter was hard? It could have been a panic grass, but I think in that case, it was little blue stem.
Thank you.
Great. Mm-hmm. And I think also, Anna, you're recommending a book on gathering moss.
Yes.
From yes. Robin Wall Kimmerers.
Yeah.
She's a botanist, but she writes I can only characterize it as a really special way. It's just enchanting. It's full of scientific information, and it's also just written from the soul, I think.
I have not read that. I hope to read it soon. I have it. She also wrote a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, which is also terrific.
Yes. Well, if you like that, I think you'll love this.
Yeah, I think I will too.
Great.
I need a little more time.
Yeah.
And there's also from Anna a bit about gathering rocks. And this also, I remember when I first came to Block Island, someone told me not to take rocks, Block Island rocks home when I was living elsewhere. But Anna was saying some year ago she was gathering some rocks, and it meant that she was depleting the supply of stones and ought to stop. I did not organize and stop, but thought his claim was wrong and suspected he never saw beaches in winter. Mansion Beach, which is covered by stones, all of which disappear by May. Any threat to BI stone supply to gather?
I think all things in moderation are fine. We have a lot of stones on Block Island. I mean, I think part of there is an old ordinance on the book against harvesting stone off the beach for commercial, because it was becoming a commercial thing a long time ago. It's very old. Of course, originally stones, those beach cobbles were used as ballast in the old Block Island double enders. So it's fine if you use them, but if you start like mining them, I guess that could be a problem. It is, I have to concede, hard to imagine Block Island running out of stones. But I do just, when I see people pulling off lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of beach stones to pave their road, I get annoyed, maybe unfairly, but I do. And I try to discourage them. But I think, I haven't been a walk on between Dory's and Gracie's Cove and not come home with a rock in my pocket. And they're all on my porch, and they're all special, and they all just can't help it.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm hurting the environment.
I have a small garden space that I have edged with the Block Island stones, and each one is special to me. And that's the kind of thing I think is, I'm on the mainland now, so I'm just saying it's a reminder.
Right.
It's part of Block Island there, and it's not, it's probably 40 stones. Yeah, so that kind of thing. But I remember when they used to come out and have it as a commercial thing because people wanted.
Right.
I hear a noise.
I heard in the background.
Yeah.
You agree that that's all right?
No, what in your garden? Of course, I agree. Yeah. Yeah. If that's what you're asking, your garden.
That's what I was asking. A small amount for a memory of Block Island.
I just reached over on my table, and this is what I have: a piece of pots and kettles stone. I am. They're whatever. I'm a rockhead. What can I say?
Great. Well, any other questions or comments?
My favorite thing was I just can't even believe that haircap moss. That was the most fabulous thing. And to see you, Kim, discover something that is obviously new to you, the thrill in your voice is always wonderful to hear. And also because you spend so much time on the neck, to even see you discover new trails almost to you, I guess. It's crazy, that sort of old road thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I will say this has been a benefit of COVID, right? I've had to find something else to do. And so I've had to, and when if you never learn anything as well as you do as when you have to teach it to somebody. So in the process of putting these together each week or each month, whatever it's been over the last 2 years, I've learned so much just so that I could share it. And that's been a terrific outcome. So, but I have been thinking, birding season is coming soon.
Of course.
And by the way, for those of you who are interested, the osprey showed up on Sunday. It's the first day of spring.
Excellent. Oh, great.
First day of spring. And I think I may have found a raven's nest, but I have to check that out today.
I have
Oh, I'm sorry. Was it Anna? Did you have a question?
I do, yeah. I've ordered some young pawpaw trees, which I'm planning to plant. What advice do you have? What's my best and most successful strategy to keep, other than surrounding them with wire so that the deer don't eat them? What else can you suggest?
What kind of poplar? Because poplar's not a favorite tree of mine, actually.
What poplar? Paw.
Oh, pawpaw.
Pawpaw, yes.
Oh, deer, I think you have to protect them with wire or netting, at least until they get to a height. In the case of the cedar, which they do like, I have one here which I just kept covered until it got tall enough that the deer can have the bottom half and the top half is growing fine. But the bigger problem actually is not the browse so much as if the young deer use it to scrape off their antlers. When they do that, they break through the bark and they can interrupt the flow of nutrients. So that's what you really have to protect against. You have to protect against them eating them, but also the deer rubbing, antler rubbing will kill them as well. That doesn't usually happen until fall, but it happens earlier in fall than you think. So it's September. Labor Day is not too early to make sure that you're protecting the bark.
Yeah. I also want to mention that I'm a member of the Audubon Society locally, and we just had someone talk to us about climate change. And one of the things that was appalling to me is that birds are responding by some of them laying eggs earlier when there are no insects to be eaten, so that the babies don't have any food. And other birds, on the contrary, do it at the usual time, but the insects have already left. And that's really frightening to me, because that threatens a huge population of birds.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
When I lived in Ohio along the shore of Lake Erie, that was, you know, maybe like 10 years ago now, but that was already very, very apparent. And it's not just the babies, but it's the arriving migrants.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't even get to the nesting thing because they arrive when the insects are supposed to be there. And as you say, they're gone.
Yeah.
So it could only have gotten worse.
I'm afraid so. Yeah. Well, on that happy thought.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Really fabulous. And the next one is the last one in the series, and it's a mystery walk in April. So it's a mystery. I don't know what you're going to do, where you're going to take us. And I don't.
All that means is I have no idea.
I think it's the 13th, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well,
that's the last one.
Well, for a little while.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but
I'm going to be back doing my regular walks on a pretty regular basis, and it takes a lot of time to do both.
Yeah, and the spring migration's coming up too. I'm sure you want to get to some banding. So, well, we have these recordings, Kim. So thank you.
Yeah, we'll know what next winter will bring. Who knows?
Okay, great.
We got one more.
Yep.
See you then.
All righty, great. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.